The last engineer. The warning klaxons had finally stopped, leaving Sarah Chen alone with the hollow echo of her magnetic boots against the deck plating. She moved through the cargo vessel's engineering section with practiced efficiency, her hands dancing across status panels that flickered with amber alerts. The stellar Voyager wasn't dead yet, but after 3 days of limping through deep space with a damaged drive core, she was getting closer by the hour. Status update, Sarah muttered, more out of habit than necessity. The ship's AI had gone offline during the accident that killed the rest of her engineering team. Now she was the only one left to keep the vessel's systems running, to maintain the delicate balance between catastrophic failure and bare minimum functionality. The accident replayed in her mind as she worked. The sudden power surge, the scramble to contain the cascade failure, Chief Rodriguez's final warning shot before the emergency bulkhead sealed. She pushed the memories aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. The forward capacitors needed realignment again, a job that should have taken a team of 4. She'd figure it out alone. She had to. Sarah reached for her tablet, checking the ship's remaining power reserves. Enough for another 2 weeks at current consumption rates, assuming nothing else failed. The nearest outpost was still 17 days away at their reduced speed. The math wasn't encouraging. A faint vibration through the deck plating caught her attention. Different from the usual thrum of the engines, this was more like interference. She frowned, setting down her tools and pressing her palm flat against the cold metal floor. There it was again, a regular pattern of pulses that seemed to bypass the ship's hull entirely. Sarah pulled up the sensor readings on her tablet, eyes widening as she processed the data. Something was out there, something massive, broadcasting on frequencies she'd never seen before. She switched to the external cameras, panning across the star-dotted void until there. The object was huge, easily 3 times the size of the stellar Voyager. Its hull was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, defying human engineering principles. An alien vessel, and from the looks of it, an ancient one. But what truly caught Sarah's attention were the pulses of energy emanating from its core, a distress signal, unmistakable despite its alien origin. Well, she whispered to the empty engine room, that complicates things. The rational choice would be to continue on course, conserve what little power they had left, and hope they could limp to safety. But as Sarah studied the alien ship's energy signature, she noticed something familiar in its degrading pattern. Whatever powered that vessel was failing in a way that reminded her of the stellar Voyager's own systems. She might not understand the alien technology, but she understood entropy and decay well enough. Sarah made her way to the bridge, her mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. The alien ship's mass would affect their trajectory, requiring more power for any close maneuvers. They'd need to maintain their momentum, use gravity to their advantage. She began plotting a course before she'd even fully committed to the idea. "This is probably going to get me killed," she said to the empty bridge, her fingers flying across the navigation console. "But if there's anyone alive over there," she let the thought hang unfinished. The truth was, even if the ship was as dead as it appeared, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving its mysteries unexplored. She was an engineer. Solving impossible problems was what she did. The course calculations completed with a soft chime. Sarah took a deep breath, looking out at the massive alien vessel that now filled the forward viewport. Right then, let's go make some history. The stellar Voyager's engines protested as she adjusted their trajectory, but held together. As they drew closer to the alien ship, its true scale became apparent. The geometric patterns she'd noticed earlier were actually massive panels that seemed to pulse with internal energy, despite the ship's apparent dormant state. The hull material defied analysis. Her sensors simply returned errors when she tried to scan it. Sarah suited up in the airlock, double-checking her EVA gear with methodical precision. The magnetic grapples were fully charged, her oxygen supply was at maximum, and she'd loaded every engineering diagnostic tool she could carry into her suit's utility pouches. She had no idea if any of her equipment would be compatible with alien technology, but she'd cross that bridge when she came to it. Beginning EVA, she announced to the ship's inactive logs, maintaining protocol even in solitude. Objective is to locate an entry point and assess the vessel's status. If possible, determine the nature of the distress signal. And the pattern swirled in agreement, and Sarah felt a surge of pride. Working together, they had found a solution that neither human nor AI could have devised alone. But implementing their solution proved to be another challenge entirely. As they began the power-up sequence for their first full test, Sarah noticed something wrong with the energy readings. The connection between the ships was fluctuating more than it should have been. "Guardian," she called out. "Are you seeing this?" The AI's response was immediate. Danger warnings flashed across her tablet as the power variance suddenly spiked. Sarah's hands flew across the controls, trying to stabilize the connection, but it was too late. A surge of energy ripped through the system, overloading circuits faster than either of them could compensate. Sarah was thrown backward as a panel exploded near her head, filling the air with acrid smoke. Emergency containment fields snapped into place around the damaged sections, but the damage was done. "Status report," Sarah coughed, pulling herself back to the control station. Her tablet was miraculously intact, though its screen was filled with error messages. Guardian's patterns had turned a deep red, indicating multiple system failures throughout both ships. The AI displayed a damage assessment that made Sarah's heart sink. The power surge had burned out key components in both vessels. Without them, they couldn't generate enough energy to broadcast their warning. Worse, the Stellar Voyager's engines were now completely dead. They were truly stranded. Sarah slumped against the wall, exhaustion and despair threatening to overwhelm her. They had come so close, had solved the seemingly impossible problem of communication, only to be stopped by simple physics. The components they needed couldn't be replicated with the resources they had available. But as she sat there, staring at the damage reports, something caught her eye. Guardian was still working, running simulation after simulation, testing different configurations of their remaining systems. The AI refused to give up. "Show me those power distributions again," Sarah said, straightening up. Guardian complied, and Sarah noticed something she had missed before. The energy patterns weren't random. They were following a natural resonance, like waves interfering with each other. "What if," she began, her mind racing with possibilities. "What if we don't try to fight the variance? What if we use it instead?" The patterns around her shifted from red to a questioning blue as she explained her idea. They couldn't generate enough power for a conventional transmission, but maybe they didn't need to. If they could match the natural resonance of space itself, use the variance to create a cascading wave of information, it would be like dropping a stone in a pond. Sarah said, growing more excited as she worked out the details. "The ripples spread out on their own, carrying our message with them. We wouldn't need as much initial power, just precise timing and the right frequency." Guardian's patterns brightened as it ran the calculations. The math worked, barely. It would require perfect synchronization between their systems, and they would only get one chance. If they failed, the remaining power would be drained, leaving them with no way to try again. Sarah took a deep breath, looking around at the alien ship that had become her second home. In just a few days, she had made first contact, formed a partnership with an alien AI, and developed technology that could change the course of history. Now it all came down to one final attempt. "Well, Guardian," she said, settling back at the controls, ready to make some waves. Against the void. Sarah's fingers danced across the hybrid control interface, making microscopic adjustments to the power flow. Guardian's patterns flowed around her in shades of deep purple, indicating the intense concentration the AI was devoting to their task. They had one shot at this, one chance to send their warning across the vast distances of space. "Field harmonics stable," Sarah reported, watching as the energy levels built up in their jury-rig transmission system. Beginning resonance sequence in 3, 2, 1. The deck plates hummed beneath her feet as power from both ships fed into their modified transmitter. Sarah had stripped every non-essential system from the stellar Voyager, channeling everything into this single effort. Guardian had done the same, shutting down ancient systems that had run for millennia to provide the energy they needed. On her tablet, Sarah watched the wave pattern begin to form. It was beautiful in a mathematical sense, a perfect interference pattern that would use space itself as a transmission medium. But as the power levels continued to rise, she noticed something concerning in the readings. "Guardian," she called out, "the containment field is showing microfractures. The resonance is stronger than we." The tablet's screen flickered, and lines of alien text began scrolling across it. Sarah nearly dropped the device in surprise. Whatever intelligence she was communicating with had just interfaced with her technology as easily as if it were accessing its own systems. Her tablet chimed with an incoming data stream, but instead of alien symbols, she saw familiar engineering diagrams. The alien system was translating itself into terms she could understand. Sarah's excitement grew as she realized what this meant. Not only was she dealing with an advanced artificial intelligence, but it was actively trying to help her understand its technology. "You're the ship's eye," she said, looking around at the flowing patterns that surrounded her. Or something like it. The pattern swirled in what seemed like agreement. Over the next several hours, Sarah immersed herself in the alien data. The AI. She started thinking of it as Guardian, based on a recurring symbol in its communications, was indeed the ship's central intelligence. It had been dormant for what her instruments suggested was several thousand years, activated by her ship's proximity. But as she studied the technical data, she began to notice something troubling. Buried within the engineering specifications were warnings, urgent ones, though their exact nature was still unclear. Guardian seemed to be trying to convey something critical, something beyond the immediate problems with both their ships. "There's more going on here than just repairs, isn't there?" she asked, studying a particularly complex set of equations. The patterns around her darkened, taking on a red tinge that made her skin crawl even through her suit. Guardian's response came as a series of images. Distant star systems, massive energy signatures, and what looked like wave after wave of destruction moving through space. Sarah's blood ran cold as she understood. This wasn't just a distress signal. It was a warning. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The AI displayed a timeline that made her heart skip. Whatever was coming, it would reach populated systems within months. Sarah sat down heavily on the alien deck, her mind racing. She had stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple rescue mission. Guardian had been waiting here, holding this vital information, unable to warn anyone because its systems were too damaged to broadcast across interstellar distances. She looked at her tablet, then at the flowing patterns around her. The AI had managed to interface with her simple human technology. Maybe that was the key. If she could understand enough of Guardian systems, if she could merge them with her own ship's technology. "Guardian," she said, standing up with renewed purpose. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need your help." The patterns brightened, and her tablet began filling with new data. Guardian was already anticipating her needs. Sarah worked through her suit's oxygen reserves, then through 2 more tanks she retrieved from the Voyager. Her hands flew across her tablet, mapping connections between alien and human technology, finding ways to bridge the seemingly insurmountable gap between their engineering principles. Guardian proved to be an eager partner, its vast intelligence adapting to her human perspective, finding ways to explain complex concepts through diagrams and simulations she could understand. Together, they began developing something unprecedented, a hybrid system that could transmit Guardian's warning using modified human communication protocols. But as they worked, Sarah noticed something else in Guardian's data streams. The AI wasn't just teaching her, it was learning from her as well. Her human approach to problem solving, the intuitive leaps that sometimes defied pure logic, seemed to fascinate it. Several times, she caught it implementing solutions that she knew hadn't been in its original programming. "You're adapting," she said during a brief rest break, watching as Guardian experimented with new ways to interface with her tablet, learning to think more human. The patterns around her shifted into something that looked almost like a smile. Then Guardian showed her something that made her gasp, a simulation of their hybrid system working across vast distances, carrying not just warnings, but the potential for communication between species, a bridge between different forms of intelligence. "We're not just building a warning system," Sarah realized. "We're creating a translation matrix, a way for different species to understand each other." The patterns brightened in confirmation, but there was still a problem. Even with their hybrid system designed, they needed more power than either ship could provide to broadcast the warning. Sarah's original ship was barely functioning, and Guardian's vessel, while more powerful, had critical damage to its main energy distribution network. "We need both ships," Sarah said, studying the power calculations. "If we can link them together, use the Voyager's remaining power to jumpstart your systems." She trailed off, running the numbers in her head. It might work, but it would mean sacrificing her ship's engines entirely. They would be stranded here. Guardian must have followed her thoughts, because it immediately displayed a new set of calculations. Sarah studied them, then laughed out loud. The AI wasn't just planning to use her ship's power, it was showing her how they could repair both vessels in the process, using principles that combined their technologies. "You clever thing," she said admiringly. "You've been working on this solution all along, haven't you?" The pattern swirled in what she was now certain was the AI's equivalent of pleased amusement. Then it showed her one more simulation, a future where human and alien ships worked together, sharing technology and knowledge across the galaxy. Sarah stood up, checking her oxygen levels. They were running low, but she had enough for what needed to be done. "Well then," she said, gathering her tools. "Let's make history, again." Universal language. Time was running out. Sarah's hands moved swiftly across the makeshift control interface she'd assembled from her ship's spare parts and Guardian's alien technology. The hybrid system they'd created was unlike anything humanity had ever built, a fusion of human ingenuity and alien efficiency that defied conventional engineering principles. "Power coupling at 60%, she announced, more for her own benefit than Guardian's. The AI could monitor the readings directly, its consciousness spread throughout both vessels like a digital nervous system. Around her, the flowing patterns had taken on a golden hue, indicating the delicate balance they were maintaining between the two ships' power grids. Guardian displayed a warning on her tablet. The energy variance was growing in the primary connection. Sarah nodded, already moving to adjust the field harmonics. This was the third attempt to synchronize their systems, and each failure brought them closer to a catastrophic overload that would destroy both ships. I know, she muttered, making minute adjustments to the power flow. "Too much variance, and the whole thing blows. Too little, and we won't have enough range to warn anyone." She wiped sweat from her forehead, grateful she'd finally felt confident enough to remove her helmet within the alien vessel. The real challenge wasn't just combining their technologies. It was finding a way to encode Guardian's warning in a format that other species could understand. The AI's original message was so complex, contained so many layers of data, that even their hybrid system could only transmit a fraction of it. Sarah had spent hours working with Guardian, breaking down the warning into its essential components. The threat they'd discovered was both simple and terrifying. A wave of energy moving through space, disrupting the fundamental forces that held matter together. Guardian's creators had detected it millennia ago, calculated its path, and sent ships like this one to establish a warning network. But something had gone wrong, and Guardian's vessel had been damaged, trapped in hibernation until Sarah found it. Now that same wave was approaching populated space, and they had mere months to warn everyone in its path. The math was brutal. Even if they succeeded in broadcasting the warning, thousands would likely die in the evacuation efforts. If they failed, the death toll would be in the billions. "Show me the compression algorithm again," Sarah said, studying the complex patterns that represented Guardian's latest attempt to condense the warning data. The AI had been working on new ways to encode information, inspired by Sarah's explanations of human communication methods. The patterns shifted, displaying a mathematical representation that made Sarah's eyes hurt if she looked at it too long. But within the complexity, she noticed something, a recurring sequence that reminded her of some basic programming principles. "Wait," she said, straightening up. "Go back to that last section." Guardian obliged, and Sarah's excitement grew as she recognized what she was seeing. "You're using binary as a foundation. I mean, not exactly binary, but the same principle, breaking down complex information into simple, universal patterns." The patterns brightened, and Sarah's tablet filled with new calculations as Guardian expanded on her insight. They didn't need to transmit the full complexity of the warning all at once. Instead, they could send a simple pattern that any sufficiently advanced civilization would recognize as artificial, followed by increasingly complex layers of data. "It's like teaching a language," Sarah realized. "Start with basic concepts everyone understands. Mathematics, physical constants, then build up to more complex ideas." Paused, then added, "And hope first contact doesn't get me killed." The airlock cycled, and Sarah pushed off into space. The sensation never got old, that moment of pure freedom before engaging her maneuvering thrusters. She'd trained for EVA operations extensively, but this was different. Every other time, she'd known exactly what she was dealing with. Now, she was about to attempt boarding an alien vessel of unknown origin with technology she couldn't even scan properly. As she approached the hull, the geometric patterns seemed to respond to her presence. The liquid metal surface rippled slightly, and Sarah could have sworn she saw symbols or characters flowing beneath the surface. She activated her suit's recording systems, documenting everything. If something went wrong, at least there would be data for others to find. She was nearly to the hull when she noticed something odd about her suit's readings. The alien ship's energy signature had changed, becoming more focused, more deliberate. The patterns on the hull were definitely moving now, flowing like mercury toward her position. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the ship wasn't just active, it was reacting to her presence. "Oh hell," she muttered, preparing to retreat. But before she could fire her thrusters, a section of the hull simply opened. There was no other way to describe it. The liquid metal surface parted like curtains, revealing a perfectly circular aperture that pulsed with soft, bluish light. Sarah hung in space, torn between fascination and terror. Every survival instinct screamed at her to return to her ship, to get as far away from this impossible thing as she could. But the engineer in her, the part that lived for solving mysteries and understanding how things worked, knew she couldn't turn back now. She checked her oxygen levels one more time, took a deep breath, and activated her thrusters. "Well," she said to herself as she maneuvered toward the opening, "at least if this kills me, it'll be the most interesting way anyone's ever died." The alien airlock, if that's what it was, seemed to examine her as she approached. Beams of light passed over her suit, probably scanning her, though for what purpose she couldn't guess. Then, with a suddenness that made her jump, the inner door opened. Sarah's suit's sensors immediately registered a pressurized atmosphere beyond. "Here goes everything," she whispered, and pushed herself through the doorway into history. Silent Guardian. The interior of the alien vessel defied everything Sarah knew about spacecraft design. There were no sharp angles, no obvious divisions between walls and ceiling. Everything flowed together in organic curves that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Her suit's sensors were going haywire, detecting energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible in a ship this old. "This is incredible," she breathed, watching as her words created ripples in the air. Actual visible distortions that spread out like rings on water. The atmosphere was breathable according to her instruments, but she wasn't about to risk removing her helmet. Not yet. She moved deeper into the ship, following what appeared to be a main corridor. The flowing patterns she'd seen on the hull continued inside, but here they were more active, more purposeful. They reminded her of circuit patterns, but in 4 dimensions, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. Her boot touched something that felt different from the rest of the floor, and she looked down to see symbols appearing beneath her feet. They spread out in a spiral pattern, glowing with increasing intensity. Sarah took a step back, but the symbols followed her movement. "Okay," she said, forcing herself to remain calm. "You're trying to communicate, but I don't speak. Whatever this is." She gestured at the symbols, which were now swirling around her in 3 dimensions. The patterns suddenly froze, then rearranged themselves. Sarah gasped as they formed into a perfect holographic representation of her ship, the Stellar Voyager. Every detail was exact, right down to the damage on the drive core. "Yes, that's my ship," she said, pointing to it. "We're damaged. We need help." She mimed a repair motion, though she felt slightly ridiculous doing so. The hologram zoomed in on the Voyager's engine section, highlighting the exact areas that were failing. Then, with a fluid motion, it displayed a similar system within the alien vessel, or at least what Sarah assumed was a similar system. The alien technology was far more advanced, but she could recognize analogous components. "You're damaged too," she realized. That's what the distress signal was about. The hologram pulsed once, which she took as confirmation. Sarah reached for her tablet, pulling up the diagnostic data she'd gathered from her own ship. "Look," she said, holding it up. "This is what's wrong with our systems. Maybe if we compare." Predicted. The AI's response was immediate. New calculations appeared on her screen, showing the stress points in their makeshift system. They had known this would be dangerous. Creating a wave pattern strong enough to carry their message across interstellar distances meant pushing their technology far beyond its design limits. But now, watching the containment field deteriorate, Sarah realized they had underestimated just how dangerous it would be. "We need to stabilize the field," she said, already moving to adjust the power flow. But Guardian's pattern suddenly shifted to a warning red, and new data flashed across her tablet. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood what the AI was showing her. The containment field wasn't failing because of a flaw in their design. It was failing because they had accidentally tapped into something far more powerful than they had intended. Their resonance wave wasn't just carrying their message, it was synchronizing with the very phenomenon they were trying to warn others about. "It's connecting with the wave," Sarah breathed, watching in awe as new energy patterns formed in their sensors. "Guardian, are you seeing this? We're not just sending a warning anymore. We're getting data back." The AI's pattern swirled with excitement as it processed the incoming information. Their transmission had created a feedback loop, allowing them to directly observe the approaching destructive wave. But more than that, they were learning how it worked. Sarah's fingers flew across the interface as she and Guardian raced to analyze the new data. The destructive wave wasn't a natural phenomenon as they had assumed. It was artificial. A weapon or an experiment gone wrong, created by some ancient civilization, even older than Guardian's creators. "Look at these patterns," Sarah said, studying the complex energy signatures. "They're not random. There's a structure to them, a purpose." Guardian's response appeared on her tablet, a series of calculations that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. If the wave was artificial, that meant it could be stopped. But the power requirements would be astronomical, far beyond anything their 2 ships could generate. Unless. "The resonance," Sarah said, her mind racing ahead as she worked through the implications. "We're already connected to the wave. If we can match its frequency exactly, disrupt it from within." She trailed off as Guardian displayed the completion of her thought. A simulation showing how their small transmission could cascade through the wave itself, turning its own energy against it. But the simulation also showed something else, something that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. The backlash from such a disruption would destroy anything nearby, including their ships. "How long?" she asked quietly. Guardian's response was precise. They had 14 minutes before the containment field failed completely. Just enough time to perfect their destruction pattern, but not enough to get back to the stellar Voyager and escape. Sarah stood silently for a moment, looking around at the alien ship that had become so familiar. Through the viewing ports, she could see her own vessel floating nearby. It's all dark except for the power conduits feeding their transmission system. Everything she had ever known, everyone she had ever cared about, was in the path of that approaching wave. "Well," she said finally, settling back at the controls with determined focus, "at least we'll make it count." Guardian's patterns shifted to a deep blue concern Sarah had learned to recognize. The AI displayed a series of emergency protocols, ways they might be able to shield at least one section of the ship from the backlash. "No," Sarah said firmly. "We need every bit of power we have to make this work. No holding back." The pattern swirled uncertainly, and Sarah felt a surge of affection for this impossible being she had come to think of as a friend. "Hey, we're in this together, right?" The patterns brightened in response, and Sarah's tablet filled with new calculations as Guardian threw itself fully into their task. Together, they began the delicate process of adjusting their transmission, weaving a pattern of destruction into the very fabric of space-time. As they worked, Sarah thought about the sheer improbability of it all. A human engineer and an alien AI, working together to save countless lives across multiple species. It wasn't at all how she had expected her story to end, but somehow it felt right. "Final synchronization in 3 minutes," she announced, watching the power levels climb toward their breaking point. The containment field was barely holding, their hybrid systems straining against forces they were never designed to handle. Guardian's patterns had taken on a silvery sheen that Sarah had never seen before. The AI was pushing itself to its absolute limits, processing data faster than should have been possible as they refined their disruption pattern. Outside the ship, space itself seemed to be bending, distorted by the energies they were channeling. Sarah could see the wave patterns spreading out from their position, a ripple in reality that would carry their final message to the stars. "1 minute," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Guardian, it's been an honor." The A's response wasn't in words or numbers this time. Instead, the patterns around her formed into a perfect representation of both their ships, linked together in an eternal dance among the stars. It was, Sarah realized, Guardian's way of saying goodbye. "Yeah," she whispered, smiling through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "We did make quite a team, didn't we?" The containment field began to fail as the final countdown started. Sarah took one last look at her tablet, checking that every calculation was perfect, every signal aligned exactly as it needed to be. There would be no second chances. "Initiating final sequence," she said, her voice clear and strong. "In 3, 2, 1. Sarah pressed the activation key, and the universe lit up around them. Echoes across stars. 3 months after the stellar event, as it came to be known, a research vessel arrived at the coordinates where 2 ships had once floated in the void. The space around the site was still charged with residual energy, creating patterns that danced across their sensors like ghosts of the forces that had been unleashed there. Dr. Elena Martinez stood at the main viewport of the research vessel Horizon, watching as her team deployed their sensor probes. They were the 4th expedition to visit this location, but the first to come equipped with the new hybrid scanning technology, a direct result of the message that had spread across the galaxy. "Energy patterns are stable," her assistant reported from the science station, beginning deep scan of the anomaly. Elena nodded, her mind drifting back to the day, 3 months ago, when every communication system in known space had suddenly lit up with an unprecedented transmission. The message had come in waves, starting with simple mathematical sequences that any advanced civilization could understand, then building in complexity until it contained detailed scientific data about an approaching threat and how to stop it. The destructive wave that would have torn through populated space had simply unraveled, its energy dispersing harmlessly into the void. But that hadn't been the only effect of the transmission. The signal had contained something else, something that had changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Dr. Martinez, one of her team, called out, "We're picking up the pattern again. It's just like the others described." Elena moved to the science station, watching as familiar symbols appeared on the screen. They were a combination of human and alien code, telling a story that had already become legend throughout the galaxy. The story of Sarah Chen, a lone human engineer, and an ancient alien AI called Guardian, who had sacrificed everything to save countless lives. "Begin recording," Elena said softly. "Let's see what else they left for us to find." The hybrid technology they were using, inspired by the specifications included in Sarah and Guardian's transmission, was revealing new layers of information encoded in the very fabric of space around the event site. Each expedition had discovered more pieces of the puzzle, building a more complete picture of what had happened here. "Energy signature is crystallizing," her assistant reported. It's forming into a coherent data stream." Elena watched in amazement as new information began flowing across their screens. But this wasn't just technical data. It was something far more precious. They were receiving the actual recorded thoughts and experiences of both Sarah and Guardian, preserved in the quantum fluctuations their final act had left behind. "They knew," Elena whispered, reading through the data. "They knew they wouldn't survive, but they found a way to preserve their knowledge, their story." She trailed off as she realized what she was seeing. This isn't just a record, it's a blueprint. The information flowing into their systems wasn't just about what Sarah and Guardian had done. It was a detailed guide for how to build something new. A way to bridge the gap between organic and artificial intelligence, between different species and civilizations. They had turned their sacrifice into a gift for the future. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, the sensor operator announced. "Reading signatures from 6 different species. They're all responding to the same signal we detected." Elena smiled. This was exactly what Sarah and Guardian had hoped for. Representatives from different civilizations coming together, drawn by the echoes of their achievement. The hybrid technology they had created was already breaking down barriers between species that had never been able to communicate before. "Open a channel to all vessels," she ordered. As her team complied, Elena took a moment to compose her thoughts. What they had discovered here would change the course of history, just as Sarah and Guardian had changed it with their sacrifice. "This is Dr. Elena Martins of the research vessel Horizon," she began. "Welcome to what I believe will be remembered as one of the most important sites in the history of all our peoples. What we found here isn't just a memorial to 2 brave souls who gave their lives to save us all. It's a beginning." The responses came in multiple languages, but thanks to the new translation protocols derived from Sarah and Guardian's work, they could all understand each other. Representatives from civilizations that had been isolated for millennia were suddenly able to share ideas, to work together toward common goals. As the various science teams began coordinating their efforts, Elena moved back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, encoded in the quantum fabric of space itself, Sarah Chen and Guardian lived on. Their final message hadn't just been a warning about a physical threat. It had been a proof of concept, showing what was possible when different forms of intelligence worked together in trust and friendship. "We got your message," Elena whispered to the starfield. "And we won't waste the chance you gave us." In the months and years that followed, the site of the stellar event became a hub of cooperative research and development. The hybrid technology Sarah and Guardian had pioneered led to breakthroughs in everything from medicine to space travel. But more importantly, it led to understanding between species that had once viewed each other with suspicion and fear. New ships were built incorporating both organic and artificial components, their AIs developed using principles learned from Guardian's patterns. They carried crews made up of multiple species, exploring the galaxy not as competitors but as partners in discovery. And on each of these ships, in the primary computer core, there was a small plaque bearing the same message in multiple languages. In memory of Sarah Chen and Guardian, who showed us that the greatest achievements come not from our differences, but from what we can accomplish together. Their sacrifice lit the way forward, Their echo guides us among the stars. The story of the human engineer and the alien AI became more than just history. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that in the vast darkness of space, the light of cooperation and understanding could bridge any distance, overcome any obstacle. Their legacy lived on in every new discovery, every peaceful encounter between different species, every advancement that brought the galaxy's diverse inhabitants closer together. In the end, Sarah and Guardian had done more than save countless lives. They had changed the very way life among the stars was lived. And somewhere, in the quantum echoes of their final moment, their patterns still danced together among the stars, eternal proof that the boundaries between human and artificial, between different species and civilizations, were never as solid as they seemed. They had shown that the universe's greatest strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the courage to reach across the void and forge something new together.